Hi everybody, it's Aram Chavez talking to you from AHA to Exit Live. I want to discuss and maybe argue a little bit about how much value you're bringing to the table. So this discussion is all about pricing, and it's all about your costs, your expenses. So what we need to talk about today is, where are you going to be with your pricing? If you're a startup or you're a small business, there's really only one answer. That answer is premium. Premium pricing. The premium pricing model is where we need to be as startups and small businesses. This is one of the first tenets of going from an innovator into an enterpriser. Being able to understand that your pricing is always premium is critical. Oftentimes I get this question of, or really I get a lot of individuals coming to me saying, hey, listen, I've got a better product than large keystone competitors. I've got a better service, more bells and whistles, and they're priced here. If I come in and undercut them, then my whole equilibrium model will start to take into effect, kick in, and the next thing you know, I'll get more demand and start taking market share away from the brand name. And it's a great philosophy because that's what we teach you in terms of economics and this whole, well, if you bring the price down, you'll sell more ice cream cones, right? That's not gonna happen, all right? So what I've learned the hard way is that if you don't have a brand, you don't have any brand equity, you don't have any mind share in terms of customers really knowing you, when they go to the store shelf and they see your product next to the brand and they see a lower price point, they really only think one thing: cheap, right? So you don't have the brand equity, you don't have you're not in their head already, right? So the other thing that you really have to understand as a small business and an entrepreneur is, we also don't have the cost structure of a large firm, meaning that they have these efficiencies that they have been building for decades. It's built into their entire system. And what you need to understand is there are two ways to make money. There's pricing in terms of premium pricing, and you're grossly inefficient, and so you've got a large margin. And then there's the efficiency model, right? Where you're incredibly efficient and you can bring the price of your product down and you start competing with all the other red ocean firms out there. And so you still maintain that same margin. Well, we need to make sure that our margins are high, and we need to make sure that our pricing is high if you're going to go off of that philosophy. So the argument that I'm having here with you is, don't go to the discount model, right? And be very careful about all of the costs and expenses and expenditures that go into your profits and profit margins. So there are really three primary expenses. There's your raw materials, your COGS, we call those cost of goods sold. There's your labor, and there's your overhead. And this is pretty much universal with any company. You've got these three particular costs, these expenses, and then you also have expenditures. Now, the difference between an expense and expenditure is it's big. So an expenditure is going to be all of the equipment that you utilize in order to actually make that finished good, right? So an expenditure is going to be a piece of working equipment that helps produce the widget. Now, one of the things that you have to understand with pricing is pricing only goes one way, down, right? So be careful with promotional pricing. Be careful with this freemium model, because people get used to that and you start attracting a very specific customer, and the next thing you know, your pricing is always discounted and your margins are this big. I also want you to be aware of the sales part of pricing. So with your salesmen, and let me tell you something, we're all sales, we're all in sales, right? But when your salesmen and women, when they start asking you about what your margins are, what are our margins, you're going down the wrong path. And you don't want to tell your salesmen, your saleswomen what your margins actually are, because then they know how much buffer they have, right? And they're interested in the sale. At the end of the day, they're getting paid off of sales. And what you don't want to do is give them the margin, because that's not what the market will bear. They're selling to try to entice somebody to buy and driving down the price. And that's not really where we want to be. We want to sell, and we want to sell into the market that's willing to pay a premium for your product or your service. So make sure that your promotional pricing isn't at a huge discount. Make sure that you're not doing too much or too many freemium type models, because as startups, we don't have the luxury of being efficient, right? We just don't. You're gonna carry that premium pricing over into every product that you have. Now, you also have to we're in the business of building fences, right? I mean, you start up your enterprise, the next thing you know, you're building a fence. You're trying to separate yourself from all of the other competitors out there. So what you have to make sure is that as you build this fence, you're not bleeding into other products or services that, in terms of pricing, that you're going to create. So for instance, it's okay to cannibalize your own product. Why? Because it's better that you cannibalize yourself than your competitors, right? But don't make the pricing so close all the time that it ends up bleeding into, because you end up, if you have too many products, you end up confusing the market. And what does a confused mind say? A confused mind always says no. Go with that, okay? Humor me, entertain me, go with that. A confused mind always says no. So be careful when you're building these fences on pricing, that your products are differentiated and that they don't bleed into one another, and that the pricing is always premium, but they're not so close together that you end up confusing the market. But it is okay to cannibalize. But what market are you talking about? We're talking about a very high-end demographic, a demographic that has money and is willing to spend it. What I don't want you to do is leave money on the table. So that's what happens when you start entering the market at a lower price point, is you leave money on the table. So make sure that as you are figuring out your pricing, because everyone says, well, I price it for what the market will bear. But which market, okay? It's got to be a very high-end demographic. The psychographics of that demographic have to be in we pay more and we get more, right? The philosophy here is that those who get more for less have never had more, right? So you're pricing into that market. That's your demographic. We're not trying to boil the ocean. We want to make sure that we have a niche. And if you can create a niche market and you've got a critical mass that you're targeting, it's like shooting fish in a barrel. That's the reality of it. And you're going to understand that you can then start expanding into other offerings once you have a critical mass. Show me that you can do it with a small group of people before you start going into the mass market. Okay, this is actually one of the most important parts of your startup, is to understand the pricing. If you can get the train to run on time with your specific high-end demographic, you have to start off high with a very niche market. I'm Aram Chavez, and now you're cooking with gas.